The scent of pine and lightning is supposed to be a gift. For Lana, it was a death sentence. In 1 second, she found her fated mate. In the next, he uttered the 2 words that shattered her soul. I reject. In front of the entire werewolf kingdom, Prince Damien cast her aside like trash. But he made one fatal mistake. He did it in front of his father, the Alpha King. And in a world of savage power, the king doesn't let a precious gift go to waste, even if his own son is the one who threw it away. The air in the great hall of the Blood Moon Citadel was thick with the scent of power, ancient stone, and nervous anticipation. It was the night of the Sovereign's Hunt, the one night every decade when all unmated wolves of age presented themselves to the Alpha King's line. For a girl like Lana from the remote Silverwood pack, it was less a hope and more a terrifying duty. Her pack was small, known for its healers and herbalists, not its warriors. She was pale and slender, her auburn hair a stark contrast to the golden blonde and raven-black manes of the court-bred females. Her wolf, Lyra, was a quiet, gentle creature, currently curled tight with anxiety inside her. Keep your head down, Lana, her pack's alpha, a kind old man named Alistair, had warned her. We are here to show loyalty, not to catch an eye. The royals, they are a different breed. She tried. She stood in the long, shuffling line, her simple green wool dress feeling like a sackcloth next to the silks and velvets around her. The hall was a cavern of torchlight, shadows dancing on tapestries depicting great battles. At the end of the hall, on 2 massive thrones of weirwood and iron, sat the royal family. Alpha King Thorn was a man who looked carved from the mountain itself. His presence was a physical weight in the room, his dark hair threaded with silver, his steel-grey eyes missing nothing. Beside him, his son, Prince Damien. Damien was everything, the songs said. Golden, impossibly handsome, with a predator's grace and an aura of crackling, arrogant power. He was the heir, the future, and he looked utterly bored by the proceedings. One by one, the wolves approached, bowed, and were dismissed. A nod from the king. A wave of the hand from the prince. Then it was Lana's turn. She kept her eyes on the floor, as instructed. She moved forward, her heart hammering. She was 10 feet away when it hit her. Pine and lightning. It was the most intoxicating, overwhelming scent she had ever experienced. It flooded her senses, bypassed her brain, and went straight to her wolf. Lyra sprang to life, howling mate, in her mind with such joy that Lana's knees buckled. She gasped, her head snapping up, her eyes, wide with shock, locked with Prince Damien's. His own eyes had flashed from Arctic blue to a blinding, possessive silver. He'd scented her, too. The fated bond, the moon goddess's most sacred gift, slammed into place between them, a tangible, golden cord of energy. Lana felt a rush of euphoria so strong it made her dizzy. Him? The prince? The goddess had chosen her? Damien stood up from his throne. The hall went silent. He walked down the steps, his silver eyes fixed on her. The scent of pine and lightning was so strong now, she could taste it. He stopped directly in front of her. He looked her up and down. His gaze was not one of joy, or passion, or even recognition. It was cold. It was calculating. He took in her simple dress, her ungloved hands, her lack of any pack sigil indicating wealth or power. He saw her slender frame, felt her aura, gentle, healing, but not powerful in the way of a warrior. He sniffed the air once. A look of profound disappointment, then pure disgust, crossed his perfect features. No, he whispered, so low only she could hear. Absolutely not. Lana's burgeoning hope died, frozen in her chest. My prince! He turned to the crowd, raising his voice so it echoed off every rafter. This is what the goddess sends me, he sneered. A weak border pack Omega? A field mouse? Laughter, nervous at first, then bold, rippled through the court. Lana felt the blood drain from her face. Damien. The Alpha King's voice was a low rumble of warning. Stop. But Damien ignored him. He looked back at Lana, his beautiful face twisted into a cruel mask. He spoke the ancient words, the ones that could sever a soul. I, Prince Damien of the Blood Moon Pack, heir to the Alpha Throne, do hereby reject you, Lana of Silverwood, as my fated mate and future Luna. The words were a physical blow. The golden cord that had just formed between them turned black and brittle. Lana cried out, clutching her chest as the bond didn't just break, it shattered. The pain was agonizing, 1,000 shards of ice driving into her heart and her wolf. Lyra howled in psychic agony, a sound no one else could hear. And, Damien added, a final spiteful twist of the knife, I reject your pack. The Silverwood pack is clearly breeding weakness. They will be censured. That pain was worse than her own, her family, her home, shamed because of her. You are dismissed, the prince spat, turning his back on her as if she were a piece of filth. The shock, the agonizing snap of the bond, and the public humiliation were too much. Lana's vision tunneled. The last thing she saw before the darkness took her was Alpha King Thorn, still on his throne, his face unreadable, his steel-grey eyes burning into her as she collapsed onto the cold stone floor. Lana woke to the smell of antiseptic herbs and clean linen. Her first thought was a dull, throbbing pain. The hollow space in her chest where the bond had been was a raw, open wound. Lyra was silent, tucked into the furthest corner of her mind, whimpering. She blinked, expecting to find herself in a cot in the servants' quarters or, worse, outside the city gates. Instead, she was in a large, well-appointed room. A fire crackled in a stone hearth. She was in a soft bed, her torn wool dress gone, replaced by a simple white cotton nightgown. She is awake. The voice was firm, but not unkind. A woman in the robes of a pack healer, Matron Bryn, approached the bed. Her face was a road map of wrinkles, her grey hair pulled into a tight bun. Where? Lana's voice was a dry croak. The palace infirmary, West Wing, Matron Bryn said curtly, handing her a cup of water. Drink. The shock of a forced rejection is severe. You were lucky. Lucky? Lana wanted to laugh or cry. My pack. He said, the prince says many things, the matron sniffed, a flicker of disapproval in her eyes. But the king makes the law. As if summoned by her words, the heavy oak door opened. Lana's breath caught in her throat. Alpha King Thorn entered the room. He had to duck his head slightly to clear the frame. He was even more imposing up close, his black tunic and leather breeches emphasizing the sheer power in his shoulders and chest. He moved with a silent, lethal grace, and his eyes, those cold, steel-grey eyes, were fixed on her. He dismissed the matron with a flick of his wrist. Lana scrambled to sit up, her heart pounding with a new fear. He was the father of the man who had destroyed her. Lana of Silverwood, he said. His voice was not a shout, but a deep bass that vibrated in her bones. He did not approach the bed, but stood by the fire, his presence filling the room. Your Majesty, she whispered, lowering her eyes. Look at me. She flinched but obeyed. His gaze was intense, analytical. He was reading her, searching for something. My son is a fool, he stated. It wasn't an apology. It was a fact. He is arrogant, short-sighted, and he has valued politics over destiny. Lana didn't know what to say. Was this a test? He has been courting Lady Isabella of the Valerius pack, the king continued, his tone dangerously smooth. Her father, Lord Valerius, holds the northern territories. An alliance. Damien saw you, a border wolf, and in his tiny mind, he saw an inconvenience to his political ambition. He chose an alliance of convenience over a blessing from the goddess. He paused, turning to stare into the fire. He has brought shame upon my house. He has insulted the goddess, and he has created a unique problem. A problem, Your Majesty? You, he said, turning back to her. A rejected mate, especially one rejected so publicly by the heir, is a target. You are a symbol of his choice. My son's allies, like Lord Valerius, will want you gone. My son's enemies will want to use you. And my son, he growled, is humiliated. A wolf's pride is a dangerous thing. He will hate you for the power you should have had over him. Lana's blood ran cold. She wasn't just shamed. She was in danger. I will leave, Your Majesty. I will go home. My pack will hide me. No, the king said. You will not. My son's rejection of you was a public act. Your disappearance would be seen as an admission of your weakness, and by extension, his right to reject you. It would validate his crime. He paced the room, his hands clasped behind his back. He has thrown away a gift. But I will not. Lana frowned, confused. Majesty? He stopped and looked at her, his expression unreadable. My son has discarded you. Therefore, you are no longer his concern. You are, however, the concern of the crown. He publicly severed his tie to you, so I will publicly forge a new one. Before she could process this, he strode to the door and threw it open. Guards were stationed outside. Beyond them, in the main hall, members of the court had gathered, drawn by the king's presence. She could see Prince Damien himself, standing with the smug, beautiful Lady Isabella clinging to his arm. King Thorn stepped out into the hall, his voice booming with the power of the Alpha. Hear me! My son, Prince Damien, has committed a grave offense. He has spat in the face of the moon goddess and rejected her chosen. This act of dishonor will not stand. Damien's face paled, his arrogance faltering. Father, she is a nobody, an omega. She is a gift you are too blind to see, Thorn roared, silencing him instantly. You have cast her out. You have made her vulnerable. You have broken the most sacred law. He turned, his gaze falling back on Lana, who was still huddled in the bed, watching in terror and awe. Therefore a new law takes its place. Since my son has abandoned this wolf, she is no longer bound by his paltry judgment. I, Thorn, Alpha King of the Blood Moon Pack and all territories, do hereby take her under my protection. Lana of Silverwood is, from this moment, a ward of the crown. She will reside in this palace. She will be given quarters befitting a high-ranking guest. She will answer to no one but me. Harm to her is harm to me. Insult to her is insult to the throne. The hall was utterly, profoundly silent. Lana stared, her mind reeling. Damien's face was a mask of thunderous, humiliated fury. Lady Isabella looked as if she'd been slapped. The Alpha King had not just protected Lana, he had elevated her. He had taken his son's rejected trash and publicly declared her a treasure of the crown. He hadn't claimed her as a mate, he had claimed her as his. And in doing so, he had drawn a battle line right down the center of his own family. Life in the Blood Moon Citadel became a waking nightmare, a gilded cage in the truest sense. Lana was moved from the infirmary to a suite of rooms in the royal wing, a stone's throw from the king's own. The rooms were larger than her entire family's cottage back in Silverwood, with a soft bed, a fireplace, and a balcony overlooking the central courtyard. But the luxury was a thin veneer over the hostility. The court saw her as an opportunist, a schemer who had somehow tricked the king. The whispers followed her everywhere. The king's pet Omega must have used some border magic on him. An affront to the prince. Lady Isabella, furious that her position as future Luna was now complicated, led the torment. She and her circle of high-born ladies would find ways to corner Lana. In the library, they accidentally toppled a shelf of books onto her. In the dining hall, a goblet of wine was spilled on Lana's new dress, one of the few she owned. "Oh, goodness," Isabella simpered, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "But I suppose you're used to stains, aren't you, dear?" Such a clumsy little thing. Lana, remembering her pack, remembering the king's warning, simply endured it. She cleaned up the messes, kept her head down, and said nothing. Her silence, her refusal to be broken, only infuriated them more. But the worst was Damien. He found her in the stables, where she'd gone to find the scent of animals and hay, something that reminded her of home. She was stroking the muzzle of a gentle mare named Starlight. "You're pathetic." Lana froze. Damien was leaning against the stall, his arms crossed. The rejection had left a phantom ache, and being near him made her skin crawl. "You think this is a victory, don't you?" he sneered, advancing on her. "Hiding behind my father's skirts? You think he wants you? He's just spiting me. You're a pawn, Lana, a weak, pathetic little pawn, and when he's tired of his game, he'll discard you too." "Please," she whispered, backing against the stall. "Leave me alone." "I would have," he growled, "if you'd had the decency to crawl back to your hovel. But you stayed. You let him parade you around. You like this." He was inches from her now, radiating menace. "You like my rooms, my power, but you will never be Luna." "I never asked to be," she cried, her first spark of defiance. "I never asked for any of this. You're the one who broke the bond." His eyes flashed silver with rage. "Don't you dare speak of the bond." He grabbed her upper arm, his fingers digging in like claws. The contact was electric and agonizing. The broken bond screamed. It was a jolt of pure nausea and pain, not just for her, but for him. He recoiled, hissing, clutching his own arm as if he'd been burned. The goddess, it seemed, did not forgive. "You witch!" he spat, cradling his hand. "That is enough." The king's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Thorn stood at the entrance to the stables, his face a mask of cold fury. He hadn't raised his voice, but the power rolling off him made the horses whinny and stamp. Damien straightened, trying to regain his composure. "Father, I was just having a word with your ward." "You were threatening a guest of the crown," Thorn said, his voice dropping to a predatory calm. "You were threatening a woman under my direct protection. You will address her as Lady Lana, and you will never lay a hand on her again." "She is nothing," Damien roared, his jealousy finally overriding his fear. "She is the Omega you are using to humiliate me, all because I chose a real Luna, a powerful alliance. You chose an ambitious shrew over a divine blessing," Thorn countered, stepping into the stable. "You mistake politics for power, Damien. You always have." He walked past his son, stopping directly in front of Lana. He studied her, his gaze lingering on the red marks on her arm where Damien had grabbed her. His eyes darkened. "You will return to your duties, Prince," Thorn ordered, without looking at him. "You are confined to the training grounds for a week. Do not let me see your face." Damn entry, his pride warring with the Alpha Command, wanted to argue. But one look at his father's face, a promise of violence he hadn't seen since childhood, made him clench his jaw. He shoved past a stable hand and stormed out. Thorn turned back to Lana. She was shaking. He hurt, she started. He hurt himself, Thorn said, his gaze softening almost imperceptibly. The bond, once broken by the rejecter, scorns him. He cannot touch you without pain. He is finding that out too late. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw not the cowering mouse his son had described, but a young woman, trembling with suppressed fear and anger, yet unbroken. You are not a pawn, Lady Lana, he said quietly. You are a person, and you are safe here, but this, he motioned to the palace around them, is a nest of vipers. You need to learn to defend yourself. I am not a fighter, she whispered, tears of frustration in her eyes. I know, he said. I am not asking you to be. There are many kinds of strength. He began to visit her, not as a king, but as something else, a protector, a mentor. He found her in the library, where she was reading books on herbalism. Instead of mocking her border magic, he brought her older, rarer texts from the royal vault. The healers of the Silverwood Pack were renowned for their poultices, he said, surprising her. My grandfather used to trade for them. He said they could knit skin back together. She looked up, shocked. You know of my pack's skills? I know many things my son ignores, he said. He began to talk to her. He asked about her home, her family, her healing. He tested her knowledge, and he was impressed. One afternoon, Matron Bryn was treating a young guard whose arm had been badly gashed by a training blade. The wound was festering. The silver in the training blades, Bryn muttered. It poisons the wound. He will lose the arm if this fever doesn't break. Lana, who had been quietly helping the matron, stepped forward. Please, let me try. Bryn raised an eyebrow, but the king, who had been observing, nodded. Let her. Lana closed her eyes. She reached out, her hands hovering over the hot, inflamed wound. She didn't just recall her mother's lessons. She called on Lyra, on the quiet, gentle part of her soul. She felt a cool, silvery light pool in her palms, the light of the moon itself. She channeled it, pushing it into the wound, commanding the poison to recede, the flesh to cool. The angry red of the wound faded. The young guard, who had been delirious, let out a long, shuddering breath and fell into a true, healing sleep. Matron Bryn stared, her jaw slack. Thorn, watching from the doorway, did not look surprised. He looked confirmed. You are not an Omega, Lana, he said softly, after Bryn had left. I am, she insisted. My wolf is not dominant. Your wolf may be gentle, but your spirit is not. You are a moon-touched. Lana looked at him, confused. What? An ancient bloodline, Thorn said, his eyes alight with a strange intensity. A healer who can channel the goddess's own light. They are impossibly rare. My grandmother was one. We thought the line had died out. He looked at her, and for the first time, Lana saw past the king. She saw a man who was carrying an immense burden. My son, he said, his voice heavy, in his quest for a warrior queen, threw away a divine healer, the one thing that could have truly strengthened his reign. He shook his head. He is, without a doubt, the biggest fool I have ever known. Lana's new title as a moon-touched healer changed things, but not entirely for the better. Matron Bryn, now convinced of her gift, took Lana under her wing, moving her from guest to protégé. The common staff and guards, who had seen her heal the young guard, began to treat her with a quiet, superstitious reverence. But the nobility, especially Lady Isabella and her father, Lord Valerius, only saw a greater threat. Where they once saw a pet, they now saw a witch. "She has enchanted the king," Valerius was heard to say in open court. "He neglects his son, his heir, for this charlatan." The tension in the palace was a tangible thing. Thorn and Damien were barely on speaking terms. The king spent more and more time in his solar, deep in strategy meetings, or in the infirmary, observing Lana's work. He and Lana developed an unlikely, quiet friendship. He would come to the infirmary late at night, bringing her a cup of tea, his large frame looking out of place among the cots and herbs. "You are tired," he would say. Not a question. "The guards are training harder." "More injuries," she would reply, cleaning her instruments. "Damien is pushing them," Thorn sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "He's trying to prove his strength. He thinks a sharp sword is the answer to everything." "And it is not?" she asked quietly. "A sharp sword is useless against a poisoned mind," he said, his gaze distant. "Lord Valerius is poisoning him, convincing him that I am weak, that I am compromised." Lana's hands stilled. "Compromised? By me?" Thorn looked at her. "Valerius sees you as the reason for the rift between me and my son. He is using that rift. He consolidates his power in the north. He whispers to the other alphas. He paints me as an aging fool obsessed with a border wolf." "I should leave," Lana said suddenly, the words tumbling out. "If I am gone, the rift will heal. He will have no reason to—" "No." His voice was sharp. "If you leave, you prove him right. You prove you are a distraction, a weakness. And worse, Valerius would have you hunted down and killed before you cross the border. You are a symbol, Lana. And you are a moon-touched. You are far too valuable to lose." His words, "too valuable to lose," echoed in her heart. He saw her as valuable. The thought was a small, warm coal in the desolate cold of her rejection. Thorn trusted her. And because he trusted her, the staff began to trust her. They were invisible to the high-born lords, and they heard everything. A week later, Lana was in the palace kitchens, helping a young servant girl, Clara, who had burned her hand. As Lana wrapped the girl's arm in a soothing poultice, Clara leaned in, her eyes wide with fear. "My lady," she whispered, I heard something. In Lord Valerius's guest rooms. I was delivering wine." "What did you hear, Clara?" Lana asked, keeping her voice calm. "He was meeting with 2 of the king's guards, Captain Maris and another. They were talking about the southern patrol. Lord Valerius, he gave them gold. He said that when the time comes, the patrol must be delayed, that the southern gate must be undermanned." Lana's blood turned to ice. The southern gate was the postern entrance, the least guarded. He said, Clara trembled, that Prince Damien, in his eagerness to prove himself, would be leading the main defense at the northern wall. Valerius said, "The boy will be a perfect distraction while we cut the head from the snake." The head from the snake. "The king—" "Thank you, Clara," Lana said, her voice steady despite the terror ripping through her. "You were right to tell me. Now, you must forget you ever heard it. For your own safety." She ran. She didn't care about decorum. She raced through the halls, clutching her skirts, ignoring the scandalized looks from the court ladies. She burst into the king's solar, not even stopping to be announced. Thorn was at his desk, poring over maps. He looked up, his eyes widening in surprise as she slammed the heavy door shut. "Lana, what is it?" "Treason!" she panted, leaning against the door. "It's Valerius. He's planning to attack. He's paid off the guards. The southern gate. He's going to cut the head from the snake. He's going to kill you." She poured out the story, Clara's words, the gold, the delayed patrol. Thorn listened, his face hardening into granite. He didn't question her, didn't doubt her. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment, his fingers steepled in front of him. "He plans to use my son as a diversion," Thorn said, his voice lethal. "He will start a skirmish at the northern wall, and while Damien and my loyal forces are engaged, Valerius and his traitors will come through the south and assassinate me. He is using Isabella to control the prince," Lana whispered. "He is," Thorn agreed. He stood, walking to the window and looking down at his kingdom. "And my son is so blinded by his pride, so desperate to outshine me, he'll walk right into the trap." He turned to her, and the loneliness, the weight of the crown, was stark on his features. "You have done more for this crown in 2 months than my son has in 20 years. He placed a heavy hand on her shoulder. "You are not a warrior, Lady Lana, but you have just become my greatest weapon. Now, let us set a trap of our own." The days leading up to the new moon were thick with a suffocating tension. Thorn, armed with Lana's information, moved his own pieces across the board. He quietly replaced the guards at the southern gate with his most elite, loyal warriors, men who had served him for decades. He sent coded messages to alphas on his borders, calling in old debts. Outwardly he did nothing. He allowed Damien to continue his aggressive training. He allowed Lord Valerius and Lady Isabella to believe their plan was undetected. Lana became his shadow. She was no longer just a healer. She was his confidant. She sat in his solar, late into the night, as he dictated messages. He valued her insight. "What do the servants say of Lord Valerius?" "Does Isabella seem confident?" She was a natural spy, quiet, unassuming, and she hated every second of it. But her fear of Valerius was eclipsed by her growing loyalty to Thorn. He had saved her. He had valued her. He was protecting his pack, and he was the first person in months who hadn't looked at her with pity or contempt. This new proximity did not go unnoticed. Damien, already on edge, saw his father's trust in Lana as the ultimate betrayal. The woman he had rejected was now in the king's inner circle. He finally snapped. Lana was in the royal library, researching a healing technique in one of the rare books Thorn had given her. The massive room was empty, lit only by the dying light of the sunset. So, the little mouse becomes the king's pet rat. Damien blocked the only exit. He'd been drinking. The sour smell of wine rolled off him. His golden boy looks were marred by a sullen, angry twist to his mouth. "Prince Damien," Lana said, standing slowly, closing the book. "You are not well." "I am perfectly well," he snarled. "I'm just wondering what kind of border magic you used. Did you offer him your healing in his private chambers? Is that how you've wormed your way in? Are you his whore now, too?" The insult was so vile, so base, that Lana flinched as if struck. "You are disgusting." "Am I?" He stalked toward her, his heavy footsteps echoing on the marble. "He's an old man, Lana. His time is over. I am the future, and you chose him. You chose the past over me." "I never had a choice," she cried, her voice cracking. "You rejected me. You threw me away in front of everyone. You shamed me and my family. And you should have stayed shamed," he roared, slamming his fist on the table, making the books jump. "But you didn't. You stayed here, in my home, letting him dote on you. You're trying to replace me." "You're replacing yourself," Lana shot back, her terror giving way to a sudden, white-hot anger. "You're so blinded by Isabella and her father that you can't see the truth. You're a pawn in their game." His eyes flared silver. "You will not speak of my Luna. She is not your Luna. I was. The goddess chose me, and you were too weak and too cowardly to accept it." It was the truth he could not bear. With a feral growl, he lunged, not for her arm this time, but for her throat. "I'll kill you myself, you little witch." He grabbed her. The moment his skin touched hers, the broken bond exploded. Damien screamed, a guttural sound of pure agony. The rejector's curse. It felt like his hands had been thrust into a forge. He recoiled, but Lana was trapped against the bookshelf. He was in so much pain he couldn't think. He just struck out, backhanding her across the face. The blow sent her crashing into the shelves. Books rained down. Pain erupted in her cheek, and something inside her broke. Not a spirit. A dam. She'd been pushed, bullied, shamed, and now struck. Lyra, her quiet wolf, rose up not with fangs, but with a different kind of power. The power of the moon touched. As Damien raised his hand to strike her again, Lana looked up. Her eyes were no longer hazel. They were glowing with a soft, ethereal silver light. "No," she whispered. She didn't lift a finger. She pushed, not with her hands, but with her mind. A wave of cold, calming, absolute power radiated from her. It wasn't an attack. It was a command. It was the voice of the moon goddess herself, saying, "Be still." The energy hit Damien like a physical wall. The rage, the drunkenness, the jealousy. It was all snuffed out, replaced by a suffocating, icy calm. His wolf, recognizing a power far greater than its own, whimpered and forcibly retreated. Damien gasped, his muscles locking. He fell to his knees, his eyes wide with a new, sober terror. He couldn't move. He couldn't even feel his anger. He was just empty. Lana stood over him, trembling, breathing hard, the silver light slowly fading from her eyes. She had done that. She had stopped the heir to the throne. The library doors burst open. "Lana!" King Thorn stormed in, flanked by two of his personal guards. He took in the scene in an instant. Lana on the floor, books scattered, a dark bruise already forming on her cheek. His son on his knees, paralyzed and staring at her in horror. Thorn's roar of fury was so powerful it shook the dust from the tapestries. "Guards, seize him!" The guards grabbed the still unresisting Damien, hauling him to his feet. Thorn was at Lana's side in a second. He gently, so gently, cupped her face, his thumb brushing the red mark on her cheek. His eyes were not steel. They were molten lava. He touched me," Lana whispered, the adrenaline fading, leaving her shaking. "The bond. It hurt him. And he hit me." Thorn's jaw clenched so hard a muscle jumped. He looked at his son, his voice a low, lethal promise. "You are stripped of your rank. You are confined to the dungeons until I decide your fate." "Father, Damien began, his voice raspy as feeling returned. "You raised your hand to a protected ward of the crown. You raised your hand to a moon touched," Thorn snarled. "You are no longer my son. You are just a prisoner." He turned his back on Damien, a gesture of ultimate dismissal as the guards dragged him from the room. He knelt before Lana, his large, calloused hands surprisingly gentle as he helped her to her feet. You saw," she whispered. "I felt it," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "The wave of power. That was you. I didn't know I could do that. You are stronger than you know, Lana." He looked at her, his expression raw. The bond between them, not a fated, fiery passion, but one of trust, respect, and a fierce, protective loyalty, cemented into place. It was not a bond of fate. It was a bond of choice. "The new moon is in 2 days," he said, his voice hardening. "Lord Valerius's plan is in motion. he has just lost his most valuable pawn. He cupped her unbruised cheek. And I have found my queen. The night of the new moon was cold and starless. The citadel was a fortress of shadows. Lord Valerius's plan began just as Clara had overheard. A fire erupted at the northern wall. A diversion. Alarms screamed. "The northern wall is breached!" A guard, one of Valerius's traitors, shouted in the main hall. Damien, who had been released from the dungeons and confined to the barracks under house arrest, saw his chance. This was it, the moment to prove his worth, to win back his father's respect, to show he was the true heir. "To the northern wall," he bellowed, grabbing his sword. "Follow me!" He led a contingent of loyal but unsuspecting warriors into the fray, just as Valerius had predicted. Lady Isabella watched him go from a high window, a cold, satisfied smile on her face. The main forces were drawn away. The citadel grew quiet. In the king's solar, Thorn stood with Lana and his 10 most trusted royal guards, the stone wolves, all of them over 50, and veterans of a dozen wars. "They're in," a scout whispered from the doorway. "Southern gate, at least 30 of Valerius's men." Captain Maris led them in. "They're heading for the throne room." "He thinks I'm in the throne room," Thorn mused, strapping a final leather bracer onto his forearm. He was not in his royal robes, but in black battle leathers. He looked every inch the warrior king. "Lana," he said, turning to her, "you and Matron Bryn will barricade yourselves in the infirmary. Do not open the door for anyone but me." "No," Lana said. Thorn stopped, surprised. "This is not a debate." "You are going to fight," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "There will be wounded. Matron Bryn cannot be in 2 places at once. I am a healer. I will be in the Great Hall, where the wounded will be brought. I will not hide." Thorn studied her, the bruise on her cheek, the resolve in her eyes. He saw not a disobedient ward, but the Luna he had just declared her to be. He gave a curt, proud nod. "As you wish, my lady. 2 stone wolves will guard you." The trap was sprung. Valerius and his 30 elite assassins burst into the throne room, expecting to find an old king at his desk. Instead, they found an empty room. The great doors slammed shut behind them. From the shadows of the gallery above, Thorn's voice echoed. "You are a poor strategist, Valerius. You should never corner a king in his own den." Archers appeared. A volley of silver-tipped arrows rained down. Half of Valerius's men fell, screaming as the silver burned them. "Ambush!" Valerius roared. "To the great hall! Find the king! Kill him!" The remaining traitors burst from the throne room, only to be met by Thorn's stone wolves. The battle spilled into the great hall, a brutal, close-quarters fight of shifter against shifter. Lana and Matron Bryn were already there, hidden behind a massive overturned oak table, supplies laid out. As the first of Thorn's men fell, they were dragged behind the barricade. "Arterial bleed!" Bryn snapped. "Lana, pressure!" Lana, her hand stained with blood, pressed down, channeling her moonlight energy, forcing the wound to clot. She worked with a frantic, focused calm, the sounds of snarling wolves and clashing steel just yards away. Thorn himself descended. He was not a man. He was a force of nature. He was older, yes, but he was the Alpha King. His wolf was a massive, scarred, black beast, and he tore through the traitors, his rage fueling him. Lord Valerius, seeing his plan in ruins, spotted his daughter, Isabella, trying to sneak out a side door. She had seen the battle turn and was abandoning her father. "Isabella!" he roared. She didn't look back. At that moment, Damien, realizing the fight at the northern wall was a farce, stormed into the great hall, his sword drawn. "Father!" He saw the carnage. He saw Valerius. He saw Isabella fleeing. "Isabella!" he cried, his voice breaking. Valerius saw his new target. If he couldn't have the throne, he would take the king's future. He lunged at the distracted Damien. Thorn saw it. "Damien, no!" Thorn threw himself in front of his son, taking the silver blade meant for Damien deep in his shoulder. The king roared in pain, staggering back. Silver! The poison was fast. Valerius raised his sword for the killing blow. "Your line ends here." "No!" Lana screamed. She did the only thing she could. She grabbed a heavy, silver water pitcher from a servant's tray and hurled it with all her strength. It struck Valerius in the back of the head. It didn't stop him, but it made him turn. His eyes, burning with hatred, found her. "The Omega Witch," he snarled. This is all your fault." He lunged at her, his bloody sword raised. Lana was frozen. This was it. She closed her eyes. A black-furred missile slammed into Valerius, sending him flying. Thorn, ignoring the silver in his shoulder, had shifted. His wolf, a beast of nightmare, tore into Valerius. The fight was brutal, primal, and short. It ended with Thorn's jaws around the traitor's throat. A silence fell over the hall, broken only by the groans of the wounded. Thorn shifted back, human, bloody, and staggering. The silver poison was already turning his veins black. He clutched his shoulder, looking at the devastation. He saw his son, Damien, kneeling on the floor, staring in abject horror at Isabella's empty doorway. He had lost everything. Then Thorn looked at Lana. She was not hiding. She was already on her knees, her hands glowing with silver light, trying to staunch the bleeding of a fallen stone wolf. He stalked across the hall, his every step an effort. He ignored his son. He ignored the healers. He walked directly to where Valerius lay dead. He dipped his fingers into the traitor's blood. Lana looked up as his shadow fell over her. He was trembling. From pain or rage, she couldn't tell. He reached out and, with his bloody fingers, drew a line across her forehead. A primal, possessive mark. His voice, amplified by his alpha power, boomed through the hall, silencing the last groans. "You see this woman?" he roared. "My son rejected her. He called her weak. He called her Omega. He was wrong." He pointed to Damien. "He chose ambition. He chose treason." He pointed to the dead Valerius. "They chose betrayal." He pointed back to Lana. She chose loyalty. She, a weak Omega, discovered the treason. She, a frightened mouse, stood her ground. She saved my guards. She saved my son. She saved me. He hauled Lana to her feet, holding her high for all to see. Damien rejected his fated gift, but the goddess provides. I, Thorn, Alpha King of the Blood Moon Pack, claim her. Not as ward, not as healer. I claim Lana of Silverwood as my Luna, my queen. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Lord Valerius's lands and titles were forfeit. Lady Isabella was captured before she reached the border. Stripped of her rank, she was banished to a silent convent of she-wolves in the far north, a fate worse than death for the vain, political creature. And Damien, he was brought before the king in the throne room the next day. Thorn sat on his throne, his arm in a heavy, silver-resistant bandage. Lana sat not in a guest's chair, but in the Luna's throne beside him. It was still empty, but her presence beside it was a clear statement. Damien was on his knees, stripped of all his finery. He was a broken man. He had not only been betrayed by his lover, but he had seen, with his own eyes, the woman he'd rejected save his life and his father's kingdom. The shame was a poison worse than silver. "You betrayed your blood," Thorn said, his voice void of all paternal warmth. "You allied with my enemy. You were blinded by pride." "Father, I didn't know," Damien whispered. "You didn't want to know," Thorn roared. "You saw only what you wanted. You are not fit to lead. You are not fit to be my heir." Thorn stood. "You are stripped of your title, your name, and your inheritance. You are banished. You will travel to the northern border, to the Silverwood pack you once scorned. You will live with them, work for them, and protect them as their lowest-ranking warrior. You will learn what true strength and true loyalty look like from the pack you called weak. Perhaps one day Alpha Alistair will write to me that you have learned humility. Until then, you are no one." Damien wept, but he accepted his judgment. He was led away, a ghost of the proud prince he had been. That night, Lana stood on the balcony of her new rooms, the Queen's rooms. They adjoined the King's. She looked out over the repaired, quiet citadel. The door opened. Thorn entered, his arm in a sling, his face etched with exhaustion. "They are calling me your queen," she said quietly, not turning. I am not a queen. I'm a healer. I'm just Lana." He came to stand beside her, his massive presence a comfort, not a threat. "They called my son a prince. He was not. Titles are shadows. It is the person who gives them weight." He was silent for a moment. "My claim, in the Great Hall. It was political. It was to solidify your position, to silence all dissent." Lana's heart, which had been so full, sank. "Oh, I see. No," he said, turning her to face him. He looked down at her, his steel-grey eyes searching her face. The words were political. The feeling... He hesitated, a rare thing for him. The feeling was not. He traced the mark on her cheek, now a faint yellow blue. "Lana, my fated mate died 20 years ago, before Damien was even born. I have been alone for a long, long time. I have ruled alone. I forgot what it was to have a partner, someone to trust. I am not your fated mate," she whispered, the old wound aching. "No," he said, his voice raw. "You are not. The bond Damien broke. That was a fiery, chaotic, unpredictable thing. It was a demand from the goddess, and he refused it." He took her hands. His were large and calloused, hers small and smooth. "What I feel for you, what has grown between us, is not fate. It is not a demand. It is a choice. I choose you. Your strength, your quiet courage, your healing heart. You are the balance to my steel. You are the moonlight to my blood moon." He was the king, he could have anyone. But he was asking. "I am not a queen," she said again, her voice stronger. "Good," he rumbled, a small smile touching his lips. "I do not need a queen. I need a Luna. I need you." Lana looked into his eyes, the eyes of the most powerful wolf in the kingdom, and she was not afraid. She felt no broken, painful bond. She felt whole. She felt chosen. She stood on her toes and, for the first time, initiated contact. She kissed the rough scruff of his jaw. "And I choose you, Thorn." His arm, his good one, wrapped around her, pulling her against his chest as if she were the most precious thing in the world. Their bonding ceremony, held a month later, was not a celebration of fated mates. It was something stronger. It was the entire kingdom, all the packs, bearing witness to a chosen bond. Lana, the rejected Omega from a border pack, stood beside the Alpha King. She wore the silver and white of the moon touched, and as she accepted the Luna's sigil, her own power, her true power, settled over the crowd. A feeling of peace, of healing, of a new dawn. She had been rejected by a boy who saw only weakness, only to be claimed by a king who recognized true strength, and in the end, it was not the fated bond that made her a queen, but the chosen one that made her a legend. And so, the rejected wolf became the most powerful Luna in the kingdom's history, not because of a bond of fate, but because of a bond of choice. Lana and Thorne's story reminds us that true strength often lies where we least expect it, in kindness, in loyalty, and in the courage to heal. It teaches us that being discarded by the wrong person is often the first step to being found by the right one. What did you think of Lana's journey? Do you believe a chosen bond is stronger than a fated one? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Your stories and ideas fuel this channel. If you loved this story and want more tales of karma, drama, and unexpected triumphs, please don't forget to like this video, share it with a fellow story lover, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. We have so many more stories to tell. Thank you for listening.